Hello everyone, this is Jatin Gatyal, and in this video we'll be getting started with Python. So let's first talk about what exactly are programming languages. So programming language is a way, it is a medium in which the programmers or developers we interact with, or we basically commands the computer to do certain tasks for us. So in a very simple way, what we can do is to instruct the computer. What we can do is we can use the mouse clicks, we can use the keyboard, but that is a very high level view of how we interact with the computer. But to get to the depths of it, to get to the core functionalities of a computer, what we may need is a common programming language where we can exactly instruct the computer what it needs to do. So in a very normal sense, when two-person interacts, we use certain languages like English that both the person understand. We may use Hindi, but in the world of computer science, the only language that computer understands is binary. So for computer, everything in this world is just a zero or a one. So it uses this combination of zeros and one, just like we use the combination of A to Z in English. Uh, Computer science uses this combination of zero and one to communicate with others. So as a developer, what we can do is we can simply write a 0 1 source code. We can have a source code like this, which may also run on the system. But writing such kind of a program is really very difficult, and it becomes complex exponentially. What we have is we have some high level languages. And what are high level languages? High level languages have the syntax, or they have the constructs in such a way that it is easier for the programmer to write it, to write complex algorithms, to write complex logic into it. So for some examples of high level languages are C++ and Python. So obviously C++ is more close to the hardware as compared to Python, which means C++ can access memory and all of those things directly, whereas Python can't. But these are high level languages, and when while we are writing these languages, we come across certain keywords like if, for, else, and these directly come from the from English. So we are very much comfortable with speaking English, and thus we are comfortable writing these constructs. So there are a lot of type of languages that exist, and there should be a way via which these symbols are then translated to zeros and ones again, so that our computer can understand. So what happens is, we as developers, or we as programmers, we write this source code. We use some tools, tool for example GCC, which converts this source code into zeros and ones, and this source code is easily understandable by the, and then computers runs all the instructions that we have programmed. So keeping the compilation and conversion process in mind, we have two types of programming languages that exist. First type of programming languages are interpreted language, and others are compiled language. So a very basic difference between a interpreted and compiled language is, in case of compiled language, what we have is we have a source code. Source code is the basically all the English words that we have written as a developer in a form of a basic simple text file, let's say in our case CPP. Then we provide this file to a compiler, call it a compiler. What compiler does is, compiler reads this file and it converts it into a executable. So in the end, we'll be having a executable file like .exe. And this exe file contains zeros and ones, which is directly understandable by the computer, and it executes all the instructions inside this exe file. But in the case of interpreted language, just like Python, so Python is a interpreted language. And in the case of Python, what happens is our source code that we have written is given to an interpreter. So there is an interpreter involved in this process. What this interpreter does is it reads a single line at a time, and it converts that line into an object code. And this object code at that moment of time is directly ran on the computer. So, interpretation of any language happens line by line. So every line that I input on a in my Python source code is again converted into object code and then again ran on the system. So every line acts independently of the other part of the source code. Whereas in the case of C++ or any compiled language, if any line contains some error, the rest of the source code won't even compile. But in the case of Python, let's say this line contains some error, even then the first two lines will be executing. So the interpretation happens line by line, while in the case of compiled languages, the source code is first converted into an executable. In Windows, these executables have extension .exe, and in Linux and Unix they have an executable flag. So this is a very basic difference between interpreted and compiled languages. So as we have discussed, Python is a compiled interpreted language, and what happens is when we have a .py file, we run it inside a Python virtual machine. Have something called as Python virtual machine, and what it does is it interacts with the computer. So our computer directly interacts with the Python virtual machine. This Python virtual machine is written in, it is an interesting fact, it is written in C language. This Python virtual machine is written in C language, and what it does is it expects a .py file. It reads the .py file line by line and executes those instructions on the system. So every line in .py file is read, it is converted into the object code, and that object code is directly ran on the system. So this is the very basics of how Python works, and in the next video we'll be learning what exactly is the Python virtual machine that I'm talking about, and how can we execute our own Python source code. Thank you guys.